travelers, and welcome to Go See, Do, Explore.
Here we dive deep into the world of travel, sharing practical tips, can't-miss experiences, and the insights to help you make the most of every trip.
Whether you're a seasoned explorer or just starting to plan your next getaway, you're in the right place to get inspired and equipped.
I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh.
And together, we'll help you chart your next adventure, discover what to see and do, and share the stories that bring each place to life.
It's time to go, see, and do more. Let's explore. Hello, everybody. We're here for another episode of the Go See, Do, Explore podcast. And this time we're talking about a place we recently visited, and that is New Orleans, Louisiana.
Yeah, it was a fun trip.
NOLA, as you might call it. Do you call it that?
No.
NOLA. So I wanted to start with a little bit of history about New Orleans because it's a city in the U.S. that has a very unique cultural background, and the history has a lot to do with that. So it was founded in 1718 by French colonists. Obviously, there were already native people there, but the first Europeans were the French in 1718. The city transferred to Spain in 1763, but then went back to France in 1800. It became a part of the U.S. with the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. So there's just a lot of European cultural influence in New Orleans. And then there's other influence as well.
Yes.
Obviously, the slave trade was big in Louisiana. I was actually just reading that it was, before the Civil War, it was the biggest slave trading port in the U.S., which I thought was interesting because I thought that was Charleston. I thought that's what I had always heard. But apparently it was New Orleans. So you also get these African roots coming into the city. And then there's, of course, the Cajun and the Creole influences as well.
Yes.
If you've heard the song, the Battle of New Orleans happened in the War of 1812.
Stupid song.
Hey, I can recite a lot of words of that because of my 8th grade social studies class.
Yes.
And you like to rant about the Battle of New Orleans?
The funny thing about the Battle of New Orleans, I guess maybe not funny at all, was that the War of 1812 was over, but they didn't know. So it was pointless.
And in more recent history, obviously, there was Hurricane Katrina was absolutely devastated the city in 2005, which one of the reasons that we wanted to visit this year was because of it was 20 years after Hurricane Katrina, not like we were celebrating some sort of anniversary, but there's been a lot of new growth in the city since Katrina. A lot of the people that evacuated, obviously it's better now. It's not under 20 feet of water. And new people have come to New Orleans as well. And so New Orleans is having a moment right now. And it was pretty cool to be there.
Yes.
We had visited once before back in 2019 for about a day. And one thing I noticed between that trip and this trip was when we were there in 2019, when you went on tours, it was like they were talking a lot more about Katrina. And I felt like it was much less of a talking point now that it's been 20 full years.
Yeah. And I feel like in some ways the pandemic has supplanted a lot of that Katrina talk too.
That might be.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk about why would you visit New Orleans? And we talked a little bit just now about the vibrancy of the city. And there's a lot of change and growth in the city right now that I feel is worth checking out.
For sure.
So I mentioned in the history, there's a lot of cultural mix that has gone on in history in New Orleans. Obviously, there's the French influence, the Spanish influence, the native influence, and then you have the Creole cultures from the Caribbean and the African influence as well.
And the Cajuns, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the Cajuns, which are north of New Orleans typically.
Yeah, the Cajuns settled in the bayous of Louisiana. So New Orleans, most properly, is a Creole city, not a Cajun city. There's not really such a thing as a Cajun city. However, there's a tremendous Cajun influence in New Orleans because it is the major port city of Louisiana.
Obviously, one of the things that New Orleans is known for is Mardi Gras. I'm going to say if you are familiar with New Orleans, you're probably familiar with their Mardi Gras celebrations. Mardi Gras happens on Fat Tuesday, the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday
Yeah.
before the start of Lent. And so historically in the church, that is a time to get your partying out.
Well, I don't know about in the church. So Mardi Gras literally is French for Fat Tuesday, right? Mardi was Tuesday and Gras is fat. But it's part of the broader European carnival tradition, which was this tradition of before Lent, let's go get our sinning done. And especially in a lot of cultures, like noble people would wear masks and stuff like that so they could go out into the streets and do whatever and no one would know who they were. New Orleans definitely has that European carnival tradition like a lot of European and Latin American cities do.
Also, aside from Mardi Gras that one day, New Orleans has a huge parade season that goes all the way from Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, I don't remember when the first one is, and all the way to St. Joseph's Day, which is before Easter. That is the final parade of parade season. If you are interested in the parades of New Orleans and Mardi Gras specifically, and you're not able to travel at that time, or maybe you don't want to deal with the craziness that comes with being in New Orleans for Mardi Gras, there is Mardi Gras World, which you can go to. And you can see the floats and see how they make them. And they will give you king cake all year. That is the only place in the city where you can get king cake all year.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, I learned that on the hop on, hop off bus.
Oh.
If you don't know, king cake is a cake that is served in New Orleans for Three Kings Day or Epiphany in New Orleans. And it is a very colorful Mardi Gras colored cake that they hide a baby in it. And if you get the baby, you don't get good luck or anything like that. You just have to buy the next king cake.
This tradition, too, is another one of those traditions that's broader than New Orleans. It's a lot of, like in a lot of Latin American countries and in Europe, they do some version of that.
Also, if you are familiar with New Orleans, you are familiar with, most likely, you are familiar with their music scene. Jazz is credited with being invented in New Orleans. We went on a jazz tour, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But the roots of jazz as a genre of music kind of stem from a slave tradition in New Orleans. And then, of course, with all these other cultural influences, you get what we now know as jazz.
Yes. Jazz was definitely invented in New Orleans, a mix of cultural traditions, like you said. But there are other genres that are also significant in New Orleans, such as blues. Blues is not from New Orleans necessarily, but it has a strong tradition there. And then ragtime was big before jazz. And so, yeah, there's just this mixing of musical styles and ideas. And it's produced what is today a very vibrant music scene, not only for New Orleans jazz, which is there, but also all sorts of other kinds of music. So it's still alive, definitely, the musical traditions.
And I just love the importance that the city puts on music education and how like most of the people that you meet in New Orleans have some music experience. That's pretty cool. And of course, the city is a huge food destination. I don't know that you can have a bad meal in New Orleans.
It's probably possible, but if you pay attention, I don't think so. I don't think you will.
We're, as you probably know, if you've watched or listened to this podcast before, food is a big reason for why we travel. So we're going to make a whole separate New Orleans food episode that will come out next week.
Yeah.
All right. Before we dig into what there is to see and do in New Orleans, let's take a wine break.
Okay. We're here for the wine break.
We have wine.
We have wine. Although today, an empty bottle. We drank most of this yesterday, and we're just finishing it today. This was not like a during the podcast scenario. This is this Uva Chillable Red. We actually mentioned this last week, so here it is.
It's gone now.
It's gone now. This is from the Finger Lakes. This is from Billsboro. Last week on the podcast, we talked about our experience at Billsboro. But just as a reminder, we had a tasting with the winemaker that was really fun. And I've been really into these chillable reds lately. This one's actually labeled chillable red. Not all of them are necessarily. Red wines that can take a little bit of a chill and are maybe even designed to take a little bit of a chill. Let's try this again. I know we had it yesterday, but let's try it again. And what do you think?
It's light, fruity. It does have a little bit more oak than I would expect.
I don't know if it's oak.
No?
No, I think that's just the fruit. I think it's just a very distinct flavor from probably the Zweigelt, which this is 90% Zweigelt. I think that just has a very distinct flavor. And it's a little bit of, it tastes almost like Beaujolais Nouveau a little bit. Like, I don't think this is a carbonic wine, but it has a little bit of that mustiness that sometimes carbonic wines have, I think. Maybe it is carbonic. He didn't say it was, but maybe it is.
But yeah, it's a good, if you're looking for kind of a wine that pushes in that red direction, but you don't want that like heat that a red brings in the summer.
So spicy.
I don't mean spicy, but I don't know. There's something about a heavy red that can heat you up when it's hot outside, and that's not really appealing in the summer.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to finish this, but yeah, look for, if you can't find this one specifically, just look for Gamay Noir, Pinot Noir, some of these wines that are light and can be chilled a little bit. Anyway.
Yeah, let's go back to New Orleans.
Good wine break.
All right. I feel like most people, when they visit New Orleans, at least the first time, they want to stay in the French Quarter. The one thing with staying in the French Quarter is that it is the big tourist destination, and so the hotels tend to be more expensive. So when I was doing my research for this trip, I found that there is a neighborhood that is right next to the French Quarter called Marigny that is home to Frenchman Street, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And it's an area that's quieter than the French Quarter. So I was looking for hotels there, but then I ended up finding this one. It's where we ended up staying is called Hotel de la Monet, not Monet, not like the painter. And it was, oddly, it was a timeshare hotel.
Yes.
And there were a lot of signs about timeshares, but they sell the rooms on booking.com. You can't book them directly on their website, though. It has to be through a third party, which is just funny. But what was really cool about this hotel is it was right on Esplanade, and like right where Esplanade hits Frenchman Street. So we were very close to Frenchman Street, but we were also very close to the French Quarter, to the point that we had several Uber drivers drop us off and say, oh, wow, this is a really nice location, because it was outside of the noise of the French Quarter, but really close to everything. So I would definitely recommend that hotel. Not a lot of frills, but they had a little pool with a fountain. The room had a little kitchenette, and it had all of their rooms, because it's a timeshare, were 1 and 2 bedrooms. So that was really nice. It was a little bit more space than a traditional hotel room. So just wanted to give a shout out to Hotel de la Monet.
Yeah, it was nice. Nice place to stay.
All right. So we're going to talk about what there is to do in New Orleans. The first thing that we did when we arrived in New Orleans is we did the hop on, hop off bus. I think we've talked about this in other cities that we visited. And I think that these are a great way to get to know a city and to understand the layout and where things are. And you'll also, on this one, which was one thing that was nice, was that it had an actual tour guide narrator, where a lot of these are, you put on headphones and it's a pre-recorded spiel. And so every once in a while he would say, okay, ask me your best questions. And he gave lots of advice for different restaurants and things like that. This, I think, is a really good way to get to know New Orleans probably on your first day there. That's what I would recommend. We didn't do any hopping on or hopping off. We just rode it around. When we did visit before, it was spring break time. It was difficult if you hopped off. The lines to get back on were long. And several buses would go by. Going in the summer, it is low season or off season, and things were cheaper, and there were just a lot less crowds, which was nice. But obviously the downside of that is that it was very hot and humid.
It was. Although it wasn't really worse than here, than home.
No, it was actually hotter at home.
Yeah, that's
in
unusual.
Michigan than it was in New Orleans, which was funny. I think with the humidity, the heat index was higher in New Orleans, but like the actual temperature was higher in Michigan at the time, which is funny. Now, if you're looking for a way to get to know New Orleans without kind of the big bus tour, there's also walking tours that are offered of both the historic French Quarter and then also the Garden District, which is the historic neighborhood that was founded by American settlers when they came to New Orleans. And the French Quarter, I feel like if you are familiar with New Orleans, you'd see You've seen pictures of the French Quarter with its wrought iron railings. The Garden District has a totally different look to it. And the houses are a little bit farther apart. And it's another interesting neighborhood of New Orleans to explore.
Yeah, and people have amazing yards that is called the Garden District because they have these yards that have all sorts of plants and stuff. That's my favorite area.
Yeah, the one downside, or I shouldn't say downside, but there's not a lot of hotels in the Garden District. There's not a lot of places to stay in the Garden District.
And there's really not as much to do
No.
in the Garden District, too.
No, the French Quarter's got lots of stuff going on, and then you're close. The Garden District is close to the Central Business District as well.
And has good restaurants.
Which we will get to.
Not
in
a
the
lot
next
of attractions necessarily, yeah.
One tour that we did on this trip is we did a jazz tour, which it started in Louis Armstrong Park. Another thing I learned on this trip is that Louis Armstrong, apparently in his autobiography, he said, "My name is Louis, not Louis." I don't know exactly how you write that. I haven't read the autobiography. But apparently also when he was performing, he would introduce himself as Louis. So it is Louis Armstrong Park, and it is Louis Armstrong International Airport. I still heard a lot of people calling it Louis, but apparently the thing now is that he is Louis. And so our jazz tour, it started at Louis Armstrong Park, talked about that there's a lot of interesting art sculptures in there, and obviously it's something that you can see on your own without a tour. It is a free park that you can explore. And then we wound our way from Louis Armstrong Park to Frenchman Street to see a traditional New Orleans jazz band with a lot of history and facts and things thrown in along the way. One thing that a lot of visitors to New Orleans are interested in are cemetery tours. The cemeteries of New Orleans are not like cemeteries of other places. They're a very European, or I should say probably Spanish style. I believe
or Spanish Caribbean anyway.
Yeah, it's a Spanish style cemetery. I believe we saw the same things in Mexico City. It's like above ground tombs, and basically it's like old fashioned without technology cremation. It has nothing to do with the water level rising, which is what people always say the New Orleans cemeteries are like that for. It has nothing to do with that. The people have never floated away. It's just a different cultural way of burial. But so there's a lot of cemetery tours, and I believe the St. Louis Cemetery is one that you cannot visit without a tour. There's one of the St. Louis cemeteries. I believe there's several. So that's something a lot of people, when they visit New Orleans, want to do. It's not our thing, so we didn't do that. There's also a lot of ghost and voodoo tours, because obviously voodoo is big in New Orleans. And during our jazz tour, we witnessed some sort of voodoo ceremony during the summer solstice. Yeah. Another thing, if you want to get out of the city, something that people enjoy doing is going on swamp tours. We have not done this. It is something, so I used to visit Louisiana every once in a while as a child because I had family there, and I have done a swamp tour. It's fun. Visiting in July is not really a time that I would recommend it, although I did go when I was a kid in August, and it was over 100 degrees that day. Sure. Why we went on a swamp tour that day when we could have stayed in the nice air conditioning, I don't know. And then there's also a lot of historic plantations there as well, not too far from the city. One thing to be aware of is the way the plantations portray slavery. There's one plantation that people recommend you visit because it tells the story more from a slave's perspective than from the owner's perspective, and makes you aware of who was doing the laboring, who built that house, and giving you a little bit more historical understanding of that place, that it's not just a beautiful old house. Like, there's a dark side too. It looks like people recommend for the most ethical plantation tours to look at the Whitney Plantation, the Laura Plantation, and the McLeod Plantation as ones that are maybe tell a more ethical version of that story. All right. Something else that you can do is you can take a steamboat tour on the Mississippi River. And this is something we did. I was told that you should do the Steamboat Natchez because it is the only still operating steamboat in this area anyway. And so we booked that, and the 24 hours later, I got an email saying that they were not running the Steamboat Natchez that day for some reason. I'm guessing maybe maintenance, or possibly because because of it was the low season. Maybe it didn't sell enough since they were combining. So we ended up on the Creole Queen, which is a paddle wheeler, but I don't think it was steam powered. But it was a jazz cruise, which was fun. So we heard a jazz band playing and telling weird jokes. Yeah. And then for some reason we heard a Minnesota Boys Choir.
The Minnesota Boys Choir. They were not the Minnesota Boys Choir. They were like St. John something or other, but the jazz guys were like, hey, where's the Minnesota Boys Choir? Also, if anyone knows where the bathroom is on the Creole Queen, let us know. It was not findable.
But we did a sunset cruise, which was really nice. So we went out, watched the sunset from the boat, and then we came back and we sailed past the lights of the city, and that was a lot of fun. And I mentioned before Mardi Gras World as well as another big attraction in New Orleans. So some other sites to check out in New Orleans. The French Market is a really cool market, as the name implies. It's like a souvenir market mostly. It's not a fruit and vegetable market, not that kind of market. But it's also very close to the hotel we were staying at. So it was another pro for Hotel de la Monnaie.
Yeah, we pretty much had to walk through there or around it to get anywhere. Yeah. Depending on how busy it was, either through or around.
And they have food stalls in there if you're looking to try various foods. And that is also where Café du Monde is, which we will talk about on our food episode.
Yes. Also close to the Central Grocery, which is another one we'll talk about on the food episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about this on the food episode.
Yeah, I want to do the food episode. Why didn't we do the food episode?
Of course, one of the iconic views of New Orleans is of St. Louis Cathedral and Jackson Square, because there is a big statue of Andrew Jackson on a horse in front of the St. Louis Cathedral. So the cathedral was built in 1794 in a Gothic revival style. Most of the structure dates back to the 1850s, although a lot of it has been rebuilt and renovated over time. In fact, when we were there was plywood up on the front, and they were working on the entranceways. And if you are someone that enjoys old churches, it is open most days for free to visit, it's always nice to see some cool old architecture. In 1964, Pope Paul VI elevated the cathedral to the rank of a minor basilica, acknowledging its historical significance. So yeah, it's a beautiful building to walk around in, and Jackson Square is fun to walk around in as well. All right, so we mentioned Frenchman Street, and one thing that's cool, I guess let's just talk about what Frenchman Street is. So it is this, like maybe 2-3 blocks.
Yeah, I think 3 blocks.
Of a road, and it's just got live music venues on both sides of the street. What we did, because it was close to our hotel, we went a few times, is we just walked up and down the street, listened to where the music was coming from, and that was where we wandered in. We saw a lot of various types of music, a few jazz groups, a blues group. But so you can find various musical stylings along Frenchman Street. At least at the times that we were there, it was the ones that we went into didn't have a cover, and they just had a 1-drink minimum. They had some snacks. Some of the places had happy hour deals. So it was just a fun place to hang out, not far from our hotel, that was relaxed, air conditioned. I felt bad for the one band one of the last days that we were there, because they had been doing road construction on Frenchman Street, and the band was playing, and they had their doors open so that people, would wander in. And so they were just getting road noise and like road dust and singing. They said for 2 hours, they were singing to no one except for the construction crew outside. So I felt bad for them.
Yeah. Frenchman Street is widely considered the best place to find music downtown in New Orleans. There are other venues in other parts of the city, of course, too. It's not like exclusive, but French Quarter, for example, is not where you're going to find like the music clubs. You're going to find a whole different thing in the French Quarter. Frenchman Street is, if you're looking for music, that's where you want to go. Yeah,
another popular street to hang out on in New Orleans is Bourbon Street. This is the place there where they will sell the enormous to-go hurricanes, and people are getting out of control, and it can be loud and not a place you want to walk with sandals on. It's a place we stayed away from when we were in New Orleans. But Bourbon Street is there, and it's like the party destination of New Orleans.
If you want to hear someone blasting Taylor Swift, then,
From John Lafitte's blacksmith shop. Like,
yeah.
what?
Yeah.
John Lafitte, the notorious pirate
Yeah.
that made his home in New Orleans.
Pirate and Swiftie.
One other place to check out in New Orleans is the Sazerac House. So the Sazerac is the cocktail of New Orleans. I don't know if it's officially or not. Do you want to explain what's in a Sazerac?
Yeah, so a Sazerac is Sazerac rye. So the Sazerac brand, it's a little confusing, right? Because there's a cocktail called the Sazerac, but there's a brand of rye called Sazerac too. And it's that rye. It is Peychaud's Bitters, which is also a New Orleans product, an old-timey tincture or whatever from the days when alcohol was medicine. And then the glass is rinsed in the style of an absinthe rinse. And some people do use absinthe for that, but what is most typical is Herb Saint, which was an absinthe alternative made in New Orleans after absinthe was made illegal in the U.S. And so it's not served on the rocks. It's rather served stirred or whatever. And then garnished with a lemon peel. Yeah, it's good.
It's a very alcoholic cocktail.
It is.
It's definitely not a fruity drink.
It's
That's
kind
what you're
of
looking for.
It's in the same flavor profile as something like an old fashioned, but because it doesn't have ice, it ends up seeming a lot stronger than an old fashioned.
So the Sazerac House is run by the Sazerac Rye Company, is that?
Yeah, Sazerac is now one of these big alcohol brands.
And so you can visit the Sazerac House, which I think is like a block from the original Sazerac House where the Sazerac was invented. And it's a tour. You learn the history of the Sazerac, and then you get some drink samples. So it's fun. Free. I don't know if I mentioned that, but it's free tours. You don't need to make any reservations or anything. You just show up, and it's a fun thing to do, especially if you're visiting in the summer and it's the hottest part of the day and you're not close to your hotel.
Yeah.
All right. There are also some museums to check out in New Orleans. Probably the biggest is, and the most important, I would say, would be the National World War II Museum.
Also literally the biggest probably because it's gigantic.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
I think you could probably spend a whole day in this museum and not see everything. Our tour guide on the hop on, hop off bus, he said he worked there for 10 years and he hasn't seen everything. So that tells you just how big and how many things are in this museum. So this museum is located in New Orleans because New Orleans was home to the factory that made the Higgins boats that fueled the D-Day invasion of World War II. And so the museum started out as just a museum to D-Day, and then over the years they added on and it became the official World War II Museum of the United States. And it basically covers every part of the war that the U.S. was involved in.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, it is huge. It's very impactful. We learned a lot about World War II that we did not know. If you are someone that is a World War II buff, I would highly recommend a guided tour because there is so much to see that you're definitely going to walk past things that are important. Mm-hmm. And especially if there's a tour group standing in front of something that is important, you might walk right by it. So I think if we were to visit again, I would want to do a tour.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, something that's cool that was going on when we were there was a veteran celebrating his 100th birthday, and they had a little ceremony and they had cupcakes for him and everybody sang happy birthday. That was pretty cool to witness. Now, going from a really big museum, I'm going to talk about one of the smaller museums in the city, and that is the Jazz Museum. So we mentioned a little earlier that jazz was born in New Orleans, and so there is a museum to the history of jazz in New Orleans. It's also, interestingly, in an old mint.
Yes.
So the first floor exhibit was dedicated to the mint in New Orleans, which was interesting.
Just one small room. Yeah.
I wasn't really expecting that. But so then you go upstairs, and one of the most interesting things that they have at the museum is a piano that belonged to Fats Domino, who was a jazz musician. And interestingly, it was in his home, I believe, or in a studio. I don't remember. I think it was in his home. And it was under 20 feet of water during Hurricane Katrina. And Paul McCartney, after Katrina, after they were able to rescue the piano, he paid to restore it. And what I thought was interesting about this is because we have recently been to the Motown Museum in Detroit, where Paul McCartney also funded the restoration of that piano. So it seems like that is something that Paul McCartney is using his fortune for.
Yeah, restoring pianos.
Restoring like historically important pianos. So that's pretty cool. But there was also an exhibit about the history of jazz in New Orleans. Like I mentioned a little bit about the slave roots of jazz. So it talks about that. And was it called Conga Square, where the slaves would gather on Sundays and holidays, that they believe was like the impetus of jazz music in New Orleans. So there's an exhibit about that. There's an exhibit about the life of Louis Armstrong. There's a lot of historic instruments. There was a blues exhibit there. So if you're interested in jazz music in general in New Orleans, that's a place to check out.
Yeah, and it's right by the hotel we stayed at.
Yeah, it was right across the street, which was one of the main reasons that we went there.
Yeah.
And then we got caught in a rainstorm.
We did.
So the last museum I wanted to touch on is the Art Museum of New Orleans. So this is a small art museum, but what it has, they have a garden out back that is pretty impressive. So the New Orleans Museum of Art includes nearly 50,000 objects spanning 5,000 years of art, from the Italian Renaissance to the modern era. It's particularly strong in French and American art, as well as photography, glass, and African and Japanese works. And one of the coolest things they have is out behind the museum, they have a sculpture garden that you can walk around that's really pretty with some trees. And it's just a beautiful place to walk around if it's not too incredibly hot when you visit.
Yeah.
We didn't end up visiting on this trip because it's not super close to the French Quarter.
Yeah, but there's always next time.
There's always next time. We did visit in 2019, so I wanted to mention it because it is a place that we have been. Is there anything else you want to talk about New Orleans?
No, I'm just looking forward to our next episode, which is all about the food that we ate.
I hope that you people enjoy the episodes where we talk about the food that we ate.
Yeah, I think people do. I hope so.
But so that is an overview of New Orleans. If we missed your favorite thing, please let us know, because I'm sure there's something that is super important to someone and we didn't talk about.
That's right.
And we will see you next week when we are talking about food again.
That's right. All right.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode of Go, See, Do, Explore. Thanks for joining us in sharing the wonder of travel.
If you want more from each episode, head to GoSeeDoExplore.com, where you'll find blog posts, resources, and extras from our travels.
You can also reach us anytime at podcast@GoSeeDoExplore.com. We love hearing from you.
And if you'd like to support the show, check out GoSeeDoExplore.com/support.
We've got subscriber levels that unlock benefits like our full trip itineraries and notes, a private Discord for travel chat, and even postcards and souvenirs from our adventures.
Don't forget to rate and review the podcast. It helps more travelers like you find us.
Until next time, I'm Christopher.
And I'm Ashleigh.
Keep exploring, keep discovering, and we'll see you out there.